All right, you're going to wait for Dan now? Oh, yeah, okay. All right, today we are honored to have the John Birch Society put on a presentation about the Con-Con. Article 5 Convention, he can thoroughly explain it a lot better than I can. Here we have Shurtleff and Daniel. I don't want to mess up the last name. Okay. They're with the John Birch Society, and so this house ready.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be involved here with the Oath Keepers. I was at that meeting, about 7 years ago, Election Week Green. I think I've probably met some of you folks there. I was also there this past April 19th when they had the lockdown on the green. That was a very interesting time. I was with Dan, and I'm the one that was detailed to pick up Larry Pratt. And driving from my home in West Roxbury to Logan Airport on a Friday morning usually is a little bit of an ordeal, but when they had the shelter in place, it was like a Sunday morning. It was phenomenal. It was a very interesting experience. Anyway, before I go into my presentation, I'd like to make some recommendations, and I'll also have a call to action at the end. But if you'd like to get some updated email, get on my email list. I'm just going to pass the clipboard around. You can put your mailing address, email, phone number, whatever you like. And I always bring material when I'm speaking at a group or what have you. That's something that you see John Birch Society people do all the time. And, we give you those light bulb jokes. How many John Birches does it take to change a light bulb? It takes 3. One is set up the literature table. One to change a light bulb, one to set up the book table, you see. So that's just because the printed word is very important, even though with all the internet information we have been visiting, Dan and I, my friend and colleague back here, we've been visiting steakhouses in New England, giving press conferences and getting information out to the elected officials and some of the staff people, etc. We visited Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine. Next week we'll be doing Vermont and Connecticut. I think we'll have some help here. And we actually had a few press people show up. Can you believe that, right? And then we're going to be doing something in Albany as well. So what we do is we hand out this little 12-minute CD. It was a video, put in the CD format, but we tell the elected officials, pop it in when you drive on the way home. Most people aren't going to sit down for a short DVD. But this is a DVD in a DVD format. It's also up on YouTube, by the way. It's state legislators in Oklahoma explaining how they were able to rescind all of their state's calls. It's about 2 or 3 years old, but it's very good information. And we have lots of articles going back to the 80s on this issue. But what we've been using is a more recent one, dealing with Levin's book that came out in August, which I'll be talking a little bit about, pushing the Con-Con and proposing 11 amendments, I think 11. I think we only have 27 altogether, but he's going to put 11 more, you see. And so we make this available as well. So everybody is welcome to take one of these on the table. Compliments of us. If you'd like to get more, I hope you do. They're 2 for $1. We also have it in PDF format, so you can copy and paste and get it out in cyberspace. And unrelated to the Birch Society, it's independent. There's a wonderful summer camp program called Camp Constitution. And I saw some young people here. I thought, I'll make sure I mention this. I happen to be the co-founder and the director. And it's a week-long program, and we've had Oath Keeper folks been involved with our camp. It's a great place to be. My whole family comes for the week and get information about the camp program. So, and it'd be nice if we could even have some sponsors, people can help get people. And we've never turned away any worthy young person or families for lack of money. We never have to do. And last year we had about 100 people there. And our guest instructor, we have a number of instructors, but our featured instructor this year is Chrisanne Hall. If you're not familiar with her, look her up. She's quite a phenomenal individual. But we'll have one of our writers from the New American Magazine, Tom Edlin, with Dan. We'll be giving a class. I might be doing a class on this. But we're also taking an all-day field trip to Old Ironsides and Bunker Hill. So, and the cost of the tuition, it's all a volunteer organization. And maybe the cost, which includes everything, just about, except maybe some incidental. So please, and help support it. You can say, oh, I have children. I don't know anybody. Help support it. Go to the Facebook page. when I post stuff, I'll repost stuff. Anyway, let's get into the Constitutional Convention. Article 5. When I say con, I mean Article 5, okay? I know there's some kind of semantic deceptions going on here, but when I say Constitutional Convention, the sign says con, we're speaking about an Article 5. So this is a Facebook page, actually, of the site here. Choose freedom, stop a con. And I'm going to read you, and most of you are pretty familiar with the Constitution and Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which in either case shall be valid to all intents and purposes, also as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions of 3/4. Keep that in mind, conventions, okay? Thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808 shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses of the ninth section. That dealt with the importation of slaves, and was great because in 1807 they actually passed a law and went into effect to outlaw the importation of slaves. So that part was no longer applied. And the only thing they can't do is when it comes to the U.S. Senate, it says that no state without its consent shall be deprived of equal suffrage in the Senate. In those days, the Senate senators were appointed by the legislatures up until the 17th Amendment. I'll get into that a little bit. Let me give a brief history of the Article 5 movement, okay? 1787, Constitution's ratified. I think it was New Hampshire, was the ninth state that ratified it, and it became the law of the land, right? Rhode Island was the last state that would blow the whole over, right? 1789, first proposal for a con. And by the way, for the first 100 years, every call for a convention was a general. There was no specific reason. They may have had a reason, but it was in the Article 5 is quite clear. No matter what the resolution may say, we want to make baseball the official pastime. We want to have English, whatever they say, whatever the states motivate the states to do that. It doesn't matter. It's the call what matters. You see, and they may not even bring up that in a convention and say it's an amendment for a balanced budget. That may not even be discussed at a convention. You see, so these legislators who think we're going to save the planet by having this new amendment added, they may not even see that amendment. You see, so for the first, over 600 applications since 1789. From the late, I put 1915 and 1917, but it was actually before that, when a lot of states were trying to get an amendment to the Constitution to have the direct election of senators, U.S. senators. This was the populist movement, right? That was one of the worst things the states ever did. The state governments lost a lot of power when they did that. What happened was Congress was promising the delegates, their voters, the world, right? The senators are the ones that actually had to go back to the states, to the state legislators. Okay, here's the bill for all the stuff that Congress is, proposing. And they said, we can't do that. So they would say no to a lot of the proposals. And they were only a few states away from a convention, right? And then they passed the 17th Amendment. So those things are just down the wayside. 1970s to 1980s, we were 2 states away from a constitutional convention. Okay. In the 70s, there was this notion of having an amendment to balance the budget. And if you read the amendments then, the proposed amendments, and the ones you see today, it doesn't promise you a balanced budget. They say in case of national emergency. I think Mark Levin said that in order to have raised the budget, you have to have 26 of the states to sign on to it, right? Which really totally changes the structure of the Constitution. And I tell people, you want a balanced budget? What about a constitutional budget? I can borrow money and balance my own budget, right? Most of us have done that, unfortunately, over the years, right? We balance our budgets all the time. We just borrow the money. You see, so the idea of a balanced budget, we need a constitutional budget. That's what we should be proposing. Then we wouldn't have to worry about amendments to the Constitution for balanced budgets, right? So the John Birch Society was very, very busy, and we started getting involved in this in, say, 84, 85, showing people the folks behind the scenes that are pushing for this, and I'm going to get into that a little bit. If something sounds good, it's too good to be true, it usually is, and we know that there are folks in this country that hate the U.S. Constitution, and they would love to see it rescinded. I'm going to talk about some of those people, right? So a lot of our members and other groups, Shurtleff Eagle Forum, our group was involved, and we were able to get states to rescind their calls. And about 12 states rescinded their calls for a balanced budget amendment. And then we realized that, all these calls, there's no sunset clause on these calls that go back to 1787. So we were concerned that they could just say, hey, we have enough states for a convention. We have like 40, or we're not really sure, depending on, and so we started trying to get states to rescind their calls. And it was the most difficult task in the world because most people could care less. There wasn't any talk shows talking about it. Major political parties weren't talking about it. There was only small groups on both sides, for and against. I mean, I've been talking about it for years. Since 1988, I've been involved in this issue. And it was like people either just didn't want to hear it. It wasn't sexy. It wasn't something that got a lot of media attention, right? But we got about 12, I think it was 13 states that we were able to get them to rescind all of their calls. And in New Hampshire, we've worked for 20 years. Every 2 years, we introduce a new resolution to rescind. And they have like 4 calls going back to the 1920s or so. And we finally got it passed. In the Democrat House, first time they had Democrat majority since World War II, but it was Republicans that are ones that signed on the resolution. It was passed unanimously in both houses. Okay, so about 12, 13 states rescinded all of their calls. So we had a nice little safety net here, right? 2010, we led in New Hampshire, and it was interesting that as soon as we got that rescinded, within a matter of 6 months, it was a new call for a convention. But 2011, September, this is a very key date or an event for the more recent movement for an Article 5 convention. There was a conference at Harvard University, Harvard Law School. Danny was on the outside handing out information. I had a friend on the inside. And I tried to get to be a member of the panel, right? Not that I need to be, it was someone from our organization, but I offered myself. And I thought, hey, I have credentials. I've been testifying in hearings and know about this since 1988, but actually the first project I got involved in as a new member of the John Birch Society. And they didn't return my phone call, my emails. We did, however, get media credentials, so I showed up as a member of the New American Media Rep. And it was kind of interesting when I saw that kind of how the so-called left and the so-called right get together and sing Kumbaya. Okay, but that was the launch of the more modern calls, the more recent calls. 2012, an organization called the Goldwater Institute, named after the late Barry Goldwater, who, by the way, used to oppose one, because he's since passed away, obviously. He opposed the convention. So the group called something called Compact for America. And it took their spokesman about an hour and a half to explain exactly what they had. Anything that takes that long to figure out how it's done, usually isn't going to get too much support. And they were actually giving seminars in different parts of the country, and it was something like they were going to get states to send their governors and some of the legislators to Dallas, Texas on July 4th, where they would propose these new amendments, and that would have been considered a conference of the states. It wasn't quite an Article 5, but it could have been an Article 5. They even lost in their home court in Arizona, where they're based, so that didn't really go anywhere. That organization is still very actively pushing Article 5, right? By the way, why would you want to go to Dallas, Texas on July 4th? I mean, Boston, July 4th, a warmer, cooler climate, but Dallas, Texas? Dallas, Texas, it could kind of go in the spring, but maybe not in July 4th, right? 2013, 2014, we've seen a brand new wave of resolutions. And over the years, it's been conservative type. I use that word in quotation marks when I say conservative. Sometimes mostly neocon types, right? And a lot of people are well-intentioned who just sort of jump on a bandwagon. They don't want to look at the other side. And by the way, when I first heard about this, I thought it was a good idea. So I did a little research, you see. And so a group called Wolfpack. Anybody know what they are? You ever heard of a man named Sant Erger? I think I'm pronouncing his name right, hopefully. Young Turks. He founded this group called Wolfpack for the main purpose of a compound, Article 5 convention, right? So that's where we stand today. And they've actually introduced 2 resolutions in Massachusetts. They've introduced resolutions in New Hampshire, and they've got a group in Maine. So it's interesting that one week we're combating wolfpack people. We had a very interesting time. We testified in New Hampshire, and they had a state rep, Timothy Smith. He was the wolfpack guy that he was not was a member, but he was sponsoring their bill. And he said that over the years there's been a couple of well-funded fringe groups that have scared people. We're not trying to scare anybody, folks. We're trying to warn you. It's like Paul Revere didn't try to scare people. It was a call to action, right? And he said, well-funded fringe groups. And I said, so when I got up there, I said, well-funded fringe groups, huh? Anyone in that fitness description? Because we're probably talking about the John Birch Society. And it's interesting that people on the right will refer to us as a fringe group, too. They use the same terminology, the same argument. And I said to him, well, if anybody's well-funded, I could use a new van. My minivan has 220,000 miles, so I'll be happy to take a donation. And so I got a few laughs out of that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take their arguments, most of them. I think I can list it. If I missed any, let me know. You might have heard something I could add to this. And then refute each argument. I think that's the best way to go. Then I'll just show you some of the folks that have been involved and what we need to do. Arguments used by pro-Article 5 supporters. An out-of-control federal government. I think most people would agree to that. We have no problem with that. We agree that we have an out-of-control federal government. We also have out-of-control state governments and out-of-control local governments, right? And many of these people who all of a sudden say we have an out-of-control government were part of the problem. They've been supporting the politicians and candidates that make this possible. So you want to look in the mirror. What have you done well, we have to support the lesser of 2 evils, or whatever. Well, this is what you get. We support the lesser of 2 evils. You get evil. You see. So this isn't the reason for Article 5. This is the bad reason. Big money needs to be out of politics. Well, who's big money? The left doesn't want to have certain people supporting right-wing supporters. And when this guy, Timothy Smith, the state rep, was testifying, he said, we need to have big money out of politics. When I got the chance to testify, I said, well, we need to get big money out of this Article 5 convention movement. And I said, the Koch brothers on the right support a call for Concon. They support groups like ALEC, A-L-E-C, I'll get into that in a minute. And George Soros supports Wolfpack. And boy, did they call him back. It was kind of fun. You know, oh, what do you mean? That's not true. So after I finished, one of the attorneys said, you need to show me proof. I said, give me a business card. I don't have it with me, but I'll get it for you. And I did. I showed him that the founder of this Wolfpack group, Stent Berger, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, he was formed something called Young Turks. And if you look at the media consortium that George Soros started, and you look at go to their website, all the groups they support, guess what? Young Turks are there. See? So the guy who founded Wolfpack is funded by George Soros. So big money. Well, if free people get together and form an entity, should we be able to pool our resources and support people we choose? So what do they mean by big money? What's the definition of big money? They want to have, by the way, federal funding of elections. And by that, they will only qualify candidates. So certain people may not be qualified, so they never even get a chance to run. Article 5 convention cannot be a runaway. And that's something that a lot of folks, what we say is that the original convention under the Articles of Confederation, and it was Article 13 of the Articles of Confederation, that said that in order to have amendments, you have to have all 13 states, majority of the state, all the states, 100%. The delegates were sent, some of them were given some kind of broad authority. This was a sovereign body. And we're very glad we got what we got. There's one of the arguments, oh, you people think the Constitution is illegal. We've never said that. That's a lie. That's what a federal attorney is trying to refute our cases comes out with that. We never said that, ever said that. So you hear that. There may be some people that say that, but we don't say it. And I don't know anyone in the Article 5 opponents that said that. So we never made that big. If you believe it's illegal, then you wouldn't even get involved in the process, would you? Right? I mean, you wouldn't, because you have, by doing this, this is legitimate process here, right? And it can't be a runaway. Well, this sovereign body said, we don't have to, we're the ones that form the national government. We can do what we kind of like, right? So it is possible that the delegates at this convention can change the rules. They can ignore their instructions that they get from their states, or they can abide by them. We don't know that, do we? We don't even know these delegates will obey, right? And by the way, you can go by the process, and you can amend the Constitution to oblivion without having to form a new one. But maybe they can change the mode of ratification. In Congress, there's Congress under Article 1, Section 8 has to have all that's proper and necessary. So Congress, some legal scholars like Edwin Vera says Congress will make the rules. These folks are saying, oh, Congress is so bad, but they're going to be making the rules for the Article 5? Do you really want to do that? They had a meeting, some of these Article 5 supporters, the conservative ones, had a meeting in Mount Vernon. They had about 100 people there. They had no legal authority. They can agree, they can shake hands, and they can write documents, but once they get to the convention, they can throw those things right out the window. Okay? So it can be a runaway, however you define runaway. We're of the opinion that it's going to be a planned runaway convention. In other words, it's not going to be just a bunch of crazy amendments that will be passed, but the folks behind it have a plan. They want to have a parliamentary system, right? They want to be able to do away with the electoral college. They want to have the parties have complete control of who runs for office. And we read their writings going back to the 1970s. There's a constitution called a New States Constitution for New States of America. I'm not suggesting that's going to be replacing it, but some of the things they want there. They want to do away with a supermajority to ratify treaties. They want to have members of the cabinet serve in the Senate, serve in the House. Totally restructure our unique form of government. Okay. 3/4 of the states need to pass proposed amendments which would effectively stop any unreasonable amendments from being passed. Well, this Wolfpack guy used that same argument. No unreasonable amendments would be passed. What is unreasonable to us, a progressive, so-called progressive? What's reasonable to us? Right? And also, as I mentioned when I read Article 5, Congress can have ratifying committees. So state legislators may not even hear this. So I would say it's reasonable to repeal the 16th Amendment, isn't it? Most of us would agree in this room, the one that gives us income tax. Do you think a progressive will find that reasonable? No. And I contend that we do a lot of unreasonable things without a con, do we? 46 states, 46 states, sight unseen, adopted Common Core because they were getting money. Republican states, liberal states, Democrat states, right? All 50 states have been implementing Agenda 21. All 50 states. A UN document that's been filtered down and being implemented, and only 2 states in the last 4 or 5 years has said no to it. And it was a bitter fight. And there's many, many more examples. States do a lot of wrong things. Look at Massachusetts, right? So don't tell me that states won't do anything unreasonable. They do it all the time. See, the media would report on this event. Oh wow, that makes me feel very secure. I can go to sleep now knowing that the media will get to the bottom of this. I can give you a recent example of how I know that won't happen. We had a press conference. There was a press conference in Maine in the middle of December. It was sponsored by For the People of Maine, or We the People of Maine. And they were promoting an Article 5 convention. They wanted to have an amendment that would do away with the notion of personhood, corporation personhood. They didn't say Wolfpack, but they're the same thing the Wolfpack people were pushing, right? And they were, at that time, the legislature was out of session. And they had a nice article in the Bangor Daily News. And I got wind of it. A friend of mine out there has a radio show, the Aroostook Watchers, which, by the way, you should tune in. You can get on online. Great show. He told me about it. He sent me the link to the article. So I said, we have to counter this as soon as we can. And we went up there in early January. I called the guy on the phone twice, emailed him. He got a news release right on his desk, right about maybe a 2-minute walk from where the press conference was. And he never showed up. to his office. There he was. His name was Christopher Cousins, typing away. And I said, "Oh, you missed our news conference." "Oh, I thought that was yesterday, and I was on another assignment." Well, they sent somebody else, right? "Well, here's the information that we use," and so on and so on. He said, "Oh, I'll definitely do a follow-up," and that was what, Dan, January 9th? No follow-up yet. So the media will probably will not cover this. Will give you all the information you need to know. They'll be very biased, right? Oh, this is what I just saw recently from one of the groups. "It is a remedy that the founders gave us, a gift." Oh, the Constitution was the gift they gave us. And now it is the Constitution. And one of the arguments they say is that the founders, when they wrote amendments, they never, in their wildest imaginations, would think that the people today would so misconstrue them. Well, if they can misconstrue amendments and interpretations of the Constitution, could they misconstrue an Article 5 convention? Could they use, today? So, states need to restore the balance of power. I agree with that. Well, what states are stepping up and saying, "We need to restore the balance of power," as they get their hand out to the federal government? You want to get the power back? Say no. Say no to Common Core. Tell them to take the money and shove it. Okay? Nullification under Article 10. That's the better gift that the founders gave us, right? And people like Mark Levin, "Oh, you're a neo-Confederate," if you believe that. You see, they don't want to touch that. And by the way, I'm not here to speak so much about the Article 10, but it should be addressed. Article 10 was used to nullify the fugitive slave laws. How's that neo-Confederacy? How's that about the end? Just recently, the Real ID Act. You remember that? 2007, 2008 or so, maybe a little bit sooner. And it was Jen Coffey, Second Amendment sister lady, that led New Hampshire said no, and people on both sides, left and right. And a number of states opted out, and guess what? This is what the government said. "Well, we'll give you a few more years." It has not been implemented. Some states have already adopted it, but a lot of states said no. So that's what's happened. So that's the solution there, right? The balance of power. The Constitution is all spelled out in the Constitution, right? It's in the 10th Amendment. It says that the powers not granted to Congress or to the federal government, or denied to the states, or those who are retained by the states. It's pretty simple, okay? So, states have CONCON all the time without any problem. These would be state constitutional conventions. And I just said, well, this is apples and oranges. These are two different things right here. When you propose amendments to your state. Well, look at Massachusetts Constitution. By the way, the oldest constitution in the world. And it's got a whole lot of amendments. And it's kind of confusing. The original part is beautiful. It talks about morality and piety and virtue are all necessary for free people. It's the duty to worship the great architect of the universe. I'm not talking about Bechtel Corporation, by the way. You see, you would never see anybody that didn't strike all that stuff out if they had a more recent. So that is not a good argument here. And I've had people say, yeah, New Hampshire had a CONCON in '68, and boy, it changed the Constitution so much. So maybe that's not the best argument. Okay. We have 26, this is the Republican, the conservative side. We have 26 states with Republican majorities. So that's the safety net. Nothing to worry about, folks, right? That makes me sleep well at night. We get guys like John McCain are going to make sure that everything in this convention goes smoothly, right? Would you trust John McCain or his worldview, people like him, at an Article 5 convention? People like him are a big part of the problem. So, and since these resolutions have no sunset clause, the timeline, yeah, even if all of these state Republicans were all constitutionalists, what will happen 2 years from now? Or 4 years, they can be voted out. So that's a bad argument right there. This was something that Mike Farris promoted in his refuting our views. The founders' generation wasn't as moral as people believe. Well, we're all sinners saved by grace, and yeah, I'm sure they weren't all. But would you compare that generation? Could you, a man of George Washington's caliber, presiding over this CONCON? Anyone like that? I know probably a couple, right? So yeah, there's always been evil people throughout the history of mankind, but I think we've probably cornered the market a little bit on that in this present generation. See, the Supreme Court has reinterpreted the Constitution, so we need a batch of new amendments to set things right. If the Constitution has misinterpreted something, that doesn't mean the Constitution is wrong. It means the Supreme Court is wrong, right? That's nonsense. That means every time a bad decision comes along, we have to have a con for another amendment. The remedy for that, by the way, is right in the Constitution. You look at Article 3 of the Constitution. Okay, because if you read Mark Levin's book, you know, and he's a pretty smart guy, you think, oh, we got it all. He didn't mention this. Members of the Supreme Court are there for good behavior. And also, Congress can limit the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Most people don't know that. You don't need the president to sign on. And have they done that? Yeah, look at labor laws. Supreme Court doesn't rule. Oh, there's some court structure, but the Supreme Court won't take that. So that's how you rein in the Supreme Court. See, not having more amendments, which will be misinterpreted again, right? This is the one, if you go to the Convention of the States, frequently asked questions, this is beautiful. The best argument we have against one is that if the federal government isn't obeying amendments now, or the Constitution now, why would the same batch of people start obeying new ones? Could you imagine Nancy Pelosi, oh my goodness, we're about to have a convention. We're going to have to start obeying the Constitution if they really get one. It's ludicrous, you see. So what they contend is that we're going to write these amendments in a way that cannot possibly be misinterpreted. Well, if you're a postmodern thinking person, like most of the folks in D.C., nothing means anything means, you know, there's no definition. Everything can be redefined. Everything's up for grabs. So these folks are smarter than the founders, and they're going to outsmart the progressives. Well, I'm amazed that they can do that, right? That's a bad argument. The left and some people on the right use this argument. The Constitution is outdated and no longer valid for our times. I'm going to be talking about this lady, Professor Meg Penrose, a law professor, says, we no longer wear the same clothes we do what people did back in 1787 and so forth. We no longer eat the same kinds of foods. What's that got to do with our Constitution, lady? Intelligent people sit there and nod their heads and think, yeah, you're right. The Constitution deals with human nature. Does human nature change because of the dates or because of the inventions and technology? So say, well, yes, free speech was a bad thing, but we should do away with that because 1787 it was good as night. Are you kidding me? You know, what about trial by jury? You want to get rid of that too because that's outdated? The Constitution was designed to check man's nature. That's what it was all about. They established a patent office for inventions. They figured that people are going to invent stuff. And so you can definitely, and also allow amendments to be added, but not something frivolous. It was a difficult process. So the Constitution is as current now as it was 200 years ago. Look at the Ten Commandments. All those obsolete because they were written, several thousand years ago. So that's not a very good argument at all. And we hear people say that. They need to be corrected on that pretty quick. People on our side, right? New amendments will force the federal government to obey this Constitution. Right? And I kind of addressed that a little bit earlier, right? All of a sudden, they'll start obeying one. Well, by the way, to write amendments that cannot be misinterpreted, the right to keep their arms shall not be infringed. That sounds pretty clear to me, right? The freedom of speech, the notion that you can't pray in a school is unconstitutional. Well, somehow someone did misconstrue that, right? We're going to change that. When these postmodern people, what did Bill Clinton say? What is, how you define is? See? So you're not going to be able to write anything that cannot be misconstrued. I guarantee it. Okay? This is the one that the Wolfpack people. Congress has a 6% approval rating, right? Well, and I said that when I testified, I said, we have a remedy that's better than Article 5. It's called elections. And all the people was the panel. They all like them. Republicans and Democrats. Yeah, we like that. So if you have a lousy member of Congress, get a new one. Every 2 years. You can have a revolution at the ballot box. That was designed that way. And Congress, the House of Representatives, is the most powerful branch. People say the president's the most powerful man in the free world or whatever. That's not his job description. That's nonsense. The president has very few duties and very few powers. And people that have read that Constitution, they know that. Congress, House of Representatives, they can impeach, all money bills, they declare war, because they haven't done that in a while, not that we want to declare war. So this is a bad argument too. Everyone's congressman is bad except for mine, because I'm getting the goodies from my member of Congress, right? But everybody else is bad. So that's not a good argument, right? We have to do something to solve the problem. We have to do something, right? I remember, I'm almost 55 years of age. I remember the wage and price controls of Nixon, the conservative Nixon. Some of you guys might remember that. And the argument was, at least he's doing something. He's making matters worse, but so what? He's doing something. That is an emotional, how about this one? We can make history. They're trying to sell, yeah, we're going to make history, you know. But we're making history by restoring the Constitution. So we'll appeal to your emotions too. We can, and it's okay to do that as long as you're guided by your brain first, right? Only well-financed fringe groups oppose an Article 5. I already mentioned this too, right? Yeah. And when I was able to testify, I was quoting Judge Bork opposes the he's deceased now. I said Warren Burger, former Supreme Court Justice. I said, well, these guys well-funded fringes. You know, lots of people have opposed an Article 5. And what's a fringe group? Right? That's a group that we don't like. We call it fringe, right? What's fringe yesterday is today. I mean, I remember in 1988, most people had no idea who Ron Paul was. Who's this guy, Ron Paul? And then next thing you know, this is a gigantic movement. He was no longer fringe, was he? See? Because people understood what he had to say, and a lot of people liked what he had to say, and he was no longer fringe. So that's an arbitrary term as well, what is fringe. And if it's a fringe group that has a lot of influence, it can't be fringe, can it? Right? But it's a term that's used to discredit legitimate opposition. That's what that term is. Okay. So here's some groups that promote in Article 5, past and present. ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, mainly a Republican group. And if I looked at their website, I might agree with almost everything they have to say. A lot of it anyway. But this one, dead against. Okay. Friends of an Article 5, go to their website because they've done a lot of research. They've got every single proposed resolution that's been ever introduced. You can find it. So it's fascinating. I disagree with what they stand for, but I actually go to them for research because they get a lot of good work here. Convention of the State, COS, I put Thomas, got to correct that. This is the group that was founded by Mark Meckler. Now, does anybody know who Mark Meckler is? Well, Mark Meckler, in his own words, he was never involved in anything up until 07 or 08. He formed the Tea Party Patriots, so like one of the Beltway type groups. I think he's from California. So here's a guy that's never done anything, any patriotic involvement, and all of a sudden he's a Tea Party leader, and he's the go-to guy. The media goes to him. Okay, he's a real estate attorney. That's his background, right? And he was the one who co-sponsored the event at Harvard University in 2011. So here's a guy that was nowhere in 2007 doing multi-level marketing and real estate transactions. Next thing you know, he's at Harvard. That's kind of interesting. It's like Eisenhower, who was a lieutenant colonel who becomes a 5-star general in about 4 or 5 months, you know. Doesn't look right. Something's not right here, okay? Wolfpack, that's the one I mentioned. That's the Soros-backed group by Seth Erger. Again, hopefully I'm pronouncing his name right. Maybe he'll call me if I'm not doing it right. Let me know. He used to be a neoconservative type with some conservative credentials, but he's since become hard left progressive type. Then there's a group called Move to Amend. Go to their website. That's the group that's Larry Lessig, the Harvard University professor, that was co-sponsored this event at Harvard. He's the one pushing this. And they're the ones that want to have, they want to have federal funding, taxpayers funding of elections, you see. They had an interesting stunt. They had a bunch of people walk across New Hampshire a couple of weeks ago, 100 and whatever miles. And they didn't get as much press as I thought, and there wasn't much about Article 5. But these people, so they're so-called progressives pushing that too. The Cato Institute, a free market type group, is pushing it. The Goldwater Institute, the Coffee Party, they were all represented at the Harvard Forum on the Con. And the Coffee Party is the alternative to the Tea Party. They're the sort of the far left progressive. Common Cause. We heard Common Cause. That was a Rockefeller Brothers or Rockefeller Foundation funded entity that was established in the early 70s, an advocacy group, right? For the longest time, they didn't take an issue with this. Now they're pushing it. And there was a fellow from Rhode Island, the Common Cause rep at Rhode Island. I sat in one of the workshops there pushing for this. So the National Governors Association is pushing it, right? And they want to be able to restore the powers of the states while they get their hand out and getting offended for the one. It was interesting that the lady who presides, Governor Fallon of Oklahoma, she's a big supporter of Common Core. The Governors Association holds the copyright for Common Core, or part of the copyright. And Mike Ferris of Homeschool Legal Defense Association is one of the guys that's involved with the Convention of States. So you've got somebody who is a strong supporter of Common Core, and you've got a strong opponent of Common Core working together for an Article 5 convention. You know, does that sound a little fuzzy to you? Yeah, a little bit. National term limits. This is the group that's pushing in Article 5. I'm in favor of term limits at the ballot box. Term limits itself, it hasn't done much with the White House. We had the president has 2 terms. Ever since we did that in the early 50s, we've had nothing but the same mindset, you know, neoconservative Republicans or liberal Democrats with little variations, right? But term limits gives us a sense of security. Well, we'll get this person out in a few years, so don't worry about it. Gives us a permanent lame duck session, right? It also restricts our rights to vote. There's a lot of people in there that we think should be in there more than 2 to 4 or 6 years, don't we? Why not? Okay. Single payer Vermont, that's a group that wants single payer, which means total federal control of the medical health care. I'm sure there are a lot of other groups, single payer type groups. And we're going to be in Vermont next week. This is February of 2014. We'll be there next week doing that. We the People of Maine, I mentioned that earlier. Alliance for Democracy, another progressive group. By the way, when you go to some of these hearings, and they're always talking about we're a democracy, we're a democracy, we're a democracy. We need to have an Article 5 to restore democracy. Well, if they wanted Article 5, they haven't even read their Constitution, because Article 4, Section 4 says we are, every state's guaranteed a Republican form of government. So you don't even know how you define your own country, the type of government we have, and they want to have an Article 5 convention. Some of the people that support this, Mark Meckler, I mentioned him. Nick Ranius is with the Goldwater Institute. Glenn Beck, popular talk show host. And, you know, Glenn Beck is good on Agenda 21. He had Ed Griffin on his show, exposing the Federal Reserve Bank, to his credit. He's dead wrong on this. And I actually recently met I met the husband. He has a little business in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, computer business. He and his wife used to be the research directors. And he had me on his radio show, online radio show. And I said to him, any way you can influence Glenn Beck? He says, once his wagon is hitched, forget it now. He's not going to turn back, unfortunately. Mark Levin, of course, the book that he came out, we'll be talking about that a little bit. Mark Levin is your typical neocon. I heard him say, in fact, I don't listen to him. I don't listen to a lot of talk radio, but I did have him on as this was heating up, because I wanted to hear what he had to say. And I guess he can't refute you. He's going to call you names. He'll just denounce you. Tom Woods, by the way, has a standing offer to debate him, right? And he said, if you win the debate, I'll give you $10,000 to the favorite charity. He won't hear from Mark Levin, I'm sure. Rush Limbaugh, we all know who he is, right? Professor Larry Lessig. Oh, I'm sorry, get back to Mark Levin. So when I was listening to the show, Mark Levin is saying, in his opinion, the greatest legal mind of his time was the late Robert Bork, right? And I thought, oh, this is good, because I have a letter that Robert Bork wrote, dated 1990, that said a convention, a con cannot be limited. It can be a runaway. It can, Congress can give instructions, but they can disobey it. So I would agree that he's probably the greatest legal mind. And the greatest legal mind said, Mark, you're wrong. You see. By the way, he banned it. I used to post on his Facebook page. It lasted about a week. I was putting all this stuff up there. No more. But I recommend you folks do that. You know, post some of the stuff. Get it from me and post it up there, and then wait till they kick you out too, right? I meant sent Urger. Now, here's this nice little. Also, we have that's the on the top right. That's the book, the cover of the book, Liberty Amendments. Tea Party Patriots. That's the Beltway type group, national group. And I got a lot of Tea Party people from around the country that I've been meeting. And they're not too happy with this group. They said they'd support them, and they were supposed to get links to their websites and donate money, and they never got much results. And one person up in New Hampshire, she was referring to an article Mark Meckler wrote refuting some of our points, and he's laughing at us, right? And she said, we've been laughing at your phony Tea Party group for the last 7 years, you know. Robert Nadelson, he's out of Colorado, professor at Colorado. He's a big supporter of this. He's working with the Convention of the States. This is he's actually referred to us as evil a couple of times. You know, we have a lot of our members that are involved, we're homeschoolers. We sort of pioneered the homeschooling, the modern movement. And because we don't embrace this, we're evil. If you can disagree, well-intentioned people disagree without calling name calling, right? But Citizens for Self-Governance is the Mark Meckler entity, and COS was sort of like under that. So Citizens Initiative is another one. The Emerging Constitution, that's Rex Tugwell. He was the man that was hired in the early 60s to write a new constitution. It was, he was an old brain truster of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, wanted a new constitution. Here's an article that was one I mentioned in Bangor Daily News. Maine group seeks constitutional convention to affirm that corporations are not people. So this is the left wing perspective. And let me mention again that it doesn't matter what the resolution says. If Maine passes a resolution, it hasn't been introduced yet in Maine, by the way, that says we want to have an Article 5 for this reason. It doesn't matter. The Constitution is quite clear that states will propose resolutions. So amendments are proposed. The purpose, whatever state wants, is irrelevant. That part means nothing. So, in other words, let's suppose that you had 34 states that passed this resolution like this. Then you had 34 states for a balanced budget. Do you have two conferences? Do you have two different conventions? You know, we're not going to work that way. So here's an example of the left wing. Now, this is a little history here. I want to mention this. This was published in the early 80s. Power to Lead. The word power. James McGregor Burns, and in fact, it's easy to remember his name because he advocates igniting crises. You know, we have to have igniting crises to be able to change the Constitution. So Burns. The last time I checked, he was still alive and well in his 90s, Williams College, and I may have to check, maybe he's since passed away. But he may not be a household name in the average American, but if you are an operative, if you're especially in the Democrat side, he's a power broker. He's a very influential guy. And he said that our founders were too smart for us. We have to make right what they put us under. In other words, the checks and balances prevented the power. You see, and he's interesting. The book. He says he has nothing but praise for our founders. You know, but it's obsolete now. But it was good for the time, but it's not good now. This is the mindset of the folks who will most likely totally control in the Article 5 Convention. Okay. This was an article in the Atlantic, right? Online article. A how-to guide to blowing up the Constitution. It was nauseating to read. It said that nobody really pays much attention to our Constitution. Even after World War II, states, countries that were reforming didn't even look to us. They looked to England and all the parliamentary systems. What John Adams said about this, our Constitution, was true, that only moral and religious people was inadequate for anybody else. That may have been the reason why these other countries didn't adopt our Constitution, right? And so they're saying that in order to blow it up, we have to have an Article 5. So, and they believe our Constitution is obsolete and needs to be changed. So that's one of the mindsets. This is I was looking for pictures for Wolfpack, and this is the best one I found, right? These are the nice progressives that are going to be sitting around the conservatives at this convention, right? The picture's worth 1,000 words, right? I'll just advance that. And there's I think it's spelled Sent. I think they spelled the name wrong, but this is the man of Wolfpack, right?
His name's Cenk. It's how it's pronounced.
Is it pronounced? Thank you. Yeah, I'll get it right. This is my second presentation on this particular, so I'll get it right within the next. So he's. Now this is the website, conconcon.org, where you can find out who was at the Harvard event, the prestigious Harvard Law School. And interesting that I was hoping that I would bump into Larry Lessig in New Hampshire, and I would say I have a solution better than Article 5. We closed all the Ivy League schools for about a generation because you folks are churning out the people that are running our country to the ground. You see, so we get rid of you guys for a generation. Maybe we have a chance. You see, and that's Mark Meckler on the bottom right. And again, it's kind of interesting. This prestigious law school, by the way, believes they're evolutionary and not just in the notion of law. Everything changes. So the contract that you wrote 10 years ago, it may be different because 10 years later, everything changes. It's been that way since 1880 when Roscoe Pound took over. So whole different way to look at that. Maybe now then you do get a guy like Edwin Vieira that comes out of the law school with the right principles, but he had them going in and didn't lose them. And again, I told you I was there. I do want to mention that I was debating some folks on Facebook, and because I'm a full-time staff member, I do get a salary. Okay, so because I'm somehow paid, I have no validity. My argument has no validity. So I said, well, there's an article. There's a Tea Party patriot lady. She's getting $90,000 a year as an advisor. Mark Meckler's getting paid. Mark Levin's making tons of money off his book, and I don't have any trouble with that. Everybody. I was in the Army. I got a salary. I mean, if I was independently wealthy, someone wants to give me their trust fund, and I don't want to have to worry about a salary, I'd be happy to live off the trust fund, right? You have a trust fund back there you can spare now? All right. Not an ass, you never know. So here are some of the luminaries, right? And I suggest you go to that website. How about if you want the slides, I can send you a link to the slides too. This lady here, Meg Penrose. I want to mention her too. About 2 weeks ago, one of my colleagues at headquarters said, Hal, I have a 3-hour video that was done. It was a conference on the Second Amendment at University of Connecticut Law School, right? Or UConn, I'm not sure if it's a law school or not. They were trashing the Second Amendment. And she's in the middle, And this was not on YouTube. It was embedded on their website. So I was hoping I just want to cut out her 12 minutes and what she had to say. So I don't have the software to do that, but I had a friend of mine that in Pennsylvania said, Hal, I can't do that. Oh, well, what am I going to do? So what he did was he actually put it on the screen, projector, and videotaped on the screen. And it looks a little grainy, but it does the job. So I made that. It's available on YouTube, where she's advocating a complete rewrite of the Constitution from an Article 5. And she's making the argument that the Constitution is obsolete. I mentioned some of the things, because we don't wear the same clothes we used to wear. And all the people, oh yeah, that's great, that's right. So now our fashion is reasons to abolish the Constitution. Now, she's not just some kind of pointy-headed professor at a little college in the middle of nowhere. She's a player because she was at the article. And I didn't know this. I saw the video, then I'm looking at this, and I says, oh, look at that. Little old Meg. She's at this Harvard convention in September, and she's brought up here in Connecticut to do a speak on Japan. So a lot of these people will say, how do we get rid of the Second Amendment? Through an Article 5 convention. And that's their plan, right? And these people who just jumped on the bandwagon a few months ago, they think they're going to outsmart these folks. I don't know about that. And of course, our beloved George Soros, he's another guy. It was an article we did. He's funding organizations. Do you think this guy's so stupid that he gives money to people he doesn't know what they're doing with it? No, I don't imagine he knows where every little dollar goes. But to give any money to Oath Keepers? How come? Right? Yeah. I bet you the Koch brothers won't give you guys any money either. Or Fred Jones. Yeah. Okay? Now, I mentioned the Governor's Council. Here they are calling for a Constitutional Convention. And there's the lady, Governor Fallon, who's a big Common Core. In fact, when I saw this, I knew that Common Core, that the Governors Association holds the patent, or a portion of the patent. So I did a little research for Governor Fallon, and she's a strong defender of Common Core. So Common Core supporters want an Article 5 convention. How's that? So here's some groups of people that oppose an Article 5 convention. Oath Keepers. You think about that group? Yeah, they're kind of fringy. I should take their name off because the John Birch Society. Yeah, there's those guys. They're on the rat too. And well-funded and fringy, right? The Eagle Forum, Phyllis Schlafly, has been around since and it's interesting that both Mark Meckler and Mike Farris, I don't know where Mark Meckler is theologically, but Mike Farris is a Christian man. Christians are commanded to treat older women as we would treat our mothers, and young women as we treat our sisters. And in one of his articles, he referred to her as an old lady in one of his presentations. And that has something to do with she's 89 years of age. She should be honored at 89, not ridiculed. And Mark Meckler was even worse. He referred to her as she's clutching a letter that she got in the 70s from her frail hands, right? But she was against this when she was their age. So that's very poor taste, right? There's no need for that, right? Defend Not Amend is an organization that just sort of started, although Richard Fry is one of the counsel to this group, the attorney from Kansas. They're sound people. American Policy Center, led by Tom DeWeese. And Tom DeVries, actually, he's a big guy opposing Agenda 21. I got a chance to meet him on a few occasions. I actually interviewed him at a conference 4 or 5 years ago. We had him out in Albany, I think it was 3 years ago, on Agenda 21. We had almost 500 people there. He's quite a great guy, and in the 90s, he was trying to stop something called Goals 2000. That was like an earlier version of Common Core. He went to Mike Ferris for support. Mike Ferris said, it's got nothing to do with homeschoolers, so I'm not going to help. Well, what does Article 5 have to do with homeschoolers directly? We know that everything has to do with homeschoolers, that has to do with the Constitution, right? Because these folks, these progressives, most of them, the connected ones, hate homeschoolers. You see, because you can't control it. Right?
There's no money.
There's no money there, right? Yeah, we're not doping our kids down. You know, we're not. Anyway, that's a Common Core is an excellent presentation. That would be another time, of course. American politics, I mentioned. Okay, Christian parties. There's various groups called Christian parties in different states. Patriot Coalition, various Tea Party groups. Some of them that sort of may have been burned by Mark Meckler and groups like that are opposing it. Edward Vieira and my good colleague Dan McGonigal is sort of he's going to write a book, Edward Vieira for Dummies, right? Because Edward's quite a profound guy. You get to read it 4 or 5 times, okay, now I get it. But he's a great writer. He's written some great articles. Professor Lawrence Tribe, he was a Harvard Law School. He was the only person, to my knowledge, that was able to speak out against Article 5 at this conference. That was billed, both sides would be presented. One person, from my knowledge, my participation, right? Professor Charlie Rice, he was the dean of Notre Dame Law School. Not exactly a fringe candidate. He's now retired. Judge Roy Borges, that's deceased. Supreme Court Justice Warren Burger. Now, I don't like Warren Burger. Meckler also was denouncing Phyllis Schlafly because this fellow was, pro-abortion. And he was somehow collaborating with these pro-abortion people. Well, Mark, you were at Harvard in September of 2011. You were hanging out with some real, like a whole lot worse than Warren Burger, right? Now, there's been some groups on the left that have opposed this. I don't recently, but historically, the ACLU. I don't think they're doing it now, but they were back in the 80s. Here's another fringe group, the Daughters of the American Revolution. They're really fringy, aren't they? And I get resolutions that they passed. The NEA, the National Education Association, a group that I really dislike. Almost everything about them is bad. There's one good little thing they had like, and they passed a resolution back in the 80s. See, back in the 70s, it was late 70s. They were having hearings. Senator what's his name from Utah, who's still in office. Name company. He was because they had a number of calls, so they figured we had no law about this, and they were holding hearings, and they had senators, law professors from various schools, and all of them were against it, and bills never passed. They never had any law. There's been no laws whatsoever. But so then these people tell you there's some guidelines. There's never been any legal guidelines at this point. The BMW, Veterans of Foreign Wars, American Legion, National Farmers Union, the AARP, another group that I don't like, but they've come out against it. Article 5. Again, these are older, back in the 80s, early 90s. The Military Order of the World Wars had a resolution against it. Now, any group would get a resolution. It could be a local group. It could be a Rotary Club, but it has a little weight. So I recommend if you're whatever groups you are, educate your people and see if we get a resolution, right? Are you ready for politicians and attorneys to change your Constitution? This is the Defend Not Amend website. Oath Keepers, yeah, I don't want to be doing those people, right? Yeah. But I'm very glad that Oath Keepers, the national level, not just local level, also came out again. In fact, I think I talked to Stu Rhodes at a function in Central Massachusetts. I introduced it to him then, and he was on board way back then, about 2007, was it, 2008? So, and he's an attorney, too. Okay, so here's some questions. If you still support Article 5, where will it be held? Do you know? It's important to know where it will be held. Who will pay for it? You're going to pay for it? You're going to buy the plane ticket, right? Who will be the delegates? So you got some people that think this is the best thing in the world, and I ask them who the delegates, and they have no idea. Mark Meckler's from California. You have a very left-wing House and Senate, and a governor who's very left-wing. Who's going to be showing up at that Article 5 from California? Right? How about anyone in this room to support Article 5? Do you think you'll be there at the convention? Who will be controlling our delegates? It will be our great and general court. That's not so great and general over several decades, right? And our governor may have some influence in this too, right? But what about New Hampshire? New Hampshire has a liberal governor and a house that's liberal Democrat controlled. What about Maine? They get a governor that's kind of conservative, but the House and Senate? No. How about Rhode Island? So just keep on going over there, who are these people be, right? How are they chosen? Will they be elected? Will they be party hacks? Will they be constitutionalists, right? By the states or by Congress? We don't know that. So like the areas of Congress will determine how it's done because they have that power to how to enforce their powers and execute their powers. Who will write these amendments that are being proposed? Some laws are written that work against us. Remember the RICO statute? It was supposed to go against racketeers or organized criminals. They use it against pro-life groups. I'm sure they're using it against patriot groups, right? So you've got to be careful how you write these things, right? There's an amendment that Mike Ferris is promoting that it's called the Parent Protection Amendment. Well, first off, the Constitution doesn't deal with that. That's something that's back at the state level or the local level. So now you're federalizing all of this. It's all being federalized by this amendment. So you're going to have the federal government controlling homeschooling, right? Controlling what parents do. You really want that? Will these amendments be used against us? Okay, and I would say, yeah, sure they will. Will delegates compromise? So let's say you get 25 or 26 states that send constitutionalists, right? And you've got 18, the rest of the states send progressive free thinkers, right? I put that in quotation marks. And here's an amendment that I want to have that's going to, repeal the 17th Amendment. And the other folks will say, what? We'll go for that, but you're going to support this. We know they're going to compromise if they're going to have this type. Okay? Well, delegates ignore the state's instructions. There's a friend of ours, I won't mention his name, I think he's a great guy, but he's wrong on this one. He's up in New Hampshire, and he says we're going to try to get a law passed that will, if the delegates don't obey the instructions, there'll be some kind of punishment. Well, I'll tell you what, if I'm going to destroy the Constitution, I'm not going to be worried about 6 months in jail or a fine. And can they even enforce a law that's a crime that's committed out of the state? I don't know. That'd be kind of an interesting thing. And Edward Vera says this stuff can be argued in courtrooms for generations without any resolution. And meanwhile, we're losing our country, you see. Will delegates change the rules? Sure they can. I mean, it will, but of course they can. Now, this is one of the spokesmen for the Convention of the States. And he said the American people are too lazy. Forget about elections. But we'll rewrite the Constitution. And he's one of the Patrick Henry University working with the Convention of the States as an intern there. And that's, I thought it was a pretty sound conservative type school, but they're wrong on this one. No unreasonable calls, right? This is Hawaii. This is a resolution for a compound that passed. I know you can't see it here too well, but they're the ones that want to have an amendment to declare Obamacare constitutional. Isn't that absurd? Well, of course, if you need an amendment to make it constitutional, what is it now? But one of our justices said it's a tax, right? It's the irony of liberalism. Oh, yeah. They want to do away with the electoral college, or as some opponents said, the electoral college, which I think is wonderful. I think it should never be tampered with. Okay? And they also want to do away with the 2/3 of the Senate ratifying treaty. We do a simple majority. We would have probably had that UN gun treaty already passed if we had that, right? So, no, I don't think we want that. So, unreasonable resolutions all the time. Okay, where do we stand? Approximately 20 states have live calls. A number of states have new calls pending, 21 and 23. Okay, and I won't go over all of them because we're worried about Massachusetts and maybe New England. New Hampshire repealed all of their old calls. We fought back a couple of new calls, and they had a call passed in 2012. And when we were testifying, we said, look, you already have a live call. You don't even have to hold any more hearings on any new resolutions. You got one. Go home, But we had to go there anyway, see. And Virginia just shut it down. I think, I forgot what house, so Virginia was sort of taken off the balance sheet. And we need to have 34 states to call for one. So we do have a little bit of a safety net, right? Some of these states may have already have recent calls. I mentioned New Hampshire. Massachusetts has new proposed resolutions, S-1727 and H-1390. They had hearings in July. I didn't find out about this since December, talking about, full disclosure, right? Larry Lefty, you can actually go to their website and see the tentative hearings. They had a whole bunch of college kids, all Wolfpack people there. And Mike Rush, who's my senator, is a Democrat. It's pretty relatively, would you call him conservative? I mean, for a Democrat, he's a great guy. But he's a pretty decent guy, and his chief staff person said that he probably won't support this. Famous last words, though, so don't, because we actually, when Dan and I testified at a hearing in the New Hampshire Senate, they came out inexpedient to legislate, which means it almost always dies. But phone calls can be made. Back in the 80s, we had one guy who was going to vote to rescind New Hampshire's call back then. He gets a call from President Reagan, right? And because he gets a phone call, he changed his vote. So he didn't have to be bribed. He was just asked by the president, and he changed his vote. So that could happen. So what I'd like you to do is, get a hold of a state senator by phone, if possible. Never mind email or a letter, by phone or in person. That's even better. It's in the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committees where it's pending right now. So here's a call to action. So contact your state reps and senators in person, by phone, by email, and on social media. Most of you politicians do have Facebook pages, right? Most are stuck up there, And and most people who are connected to politics in this room know that when a politician here, an elected official, hears something once, it's just some fringe person, but they hear 10 people talk about one issue, they start paying attention to it, right? So, oppose any new calls and repeal old calls. That's what you asked them to do, tell them to do. There's about 4 old calls, and that's going back to the 1940s and the 1920s. I have a list of those calls. On Facebook, Stop the Constitutional Convention, that's something that I started about 5 years ago, and we up-to-date information. Okay, and you see the banner down here, Choose Freedom, Stop the Con, that's the John Birch Society's Facebook page on this issue. Defend Not Amend, they have a great website and a good Facebook page, and they've got a lot of good information on that as well. Distribute CDs and DVDs, no con kits. So a no con kit with copies of letters from various law professors and reprints to elected officials. I have access to that. You give me your email address, so contact me on Facebook. I'll give you the link. I'll post a link on your Facebook page too. If you can download, it's like 15 pages of letters from professors, liberals and conservatives, past and present. I found stuff in my folder that goes back to the 80s and early 90s. Some of these resolutions from the B&W and the NRA and so forth, and you might see those postings there too. Post it, letters to the editor online, and also it goes to the newspaper's Facebook page and copy and paste that letter that they may not publish in the hard copy, right? And a lot of the local newspapers, the weeklies, are more receptive, and a lot of people still read them. They're doing relatively well, but most of the big dailies are, I'm not too sad to hear about the Boston Globe. I was hoping they got out of business about 4 or 5 years ago, now that John Henry bought it. He wants to close their branch, though, in Dorchester, move to downtown Boston, downsize. So I like that. I wish he'd go out of business, but I'll take downsizing, right? Post information on social media. My video clip of Professor Penrose has received several thousand, almost 4,000 in a few. And, like I say, a lot of people, this issue is not right on the radar, but it will be when they see this Meg Penrose. And by the way, we get people that are a little dull in the morning, they need to pick me up. If she doesn't get your blood boiling after listening to her about 4 minutes, you probably are sick. You need some medical attention, right? Post an event like this in your town, okay? And I'll be available when I'm available, or even show me video, and I'm sure some of you get up to snuff on it. I'm not a lawyer. You don't have to be a law professor. You just have a desire to get the truth out. Get a resolution passed by a civic or patriotic group, and that becomes a news release. That becomes a news story, right? The more allies we have, the better. Yeah, Mark Meckler said that all the people that matter, and he mentioned these people on talk show hosts, and only people who are opposed are fringe. Well, that's not true. That's a lie, and we're proving it all the time, right? Articles from the New American Magazine. This is the one I mentioned that I have here. This article was one of the first ones we did. Bicentennial Plot talks about folks like James McGregor Burns and how they want to have a convention, not to balance budget amendment, but to destroy our Constitution. So I have that available in a PDF format too. What I have here. This is the no con kit. We're about 15 pages long, and we actually have on the JBS website. You can send emails to your elected state officials on this issue. And it's a little, it generates a letter, but you can put your own stuff on there. And if that's all you do, that's more than most people will ever do. But we need to do a lot more. I know you guys are activists. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. I posted this on the Stop the Constitution Convention Facebook page. I pinned it so it's on the top. So you go there, you can share it with others, right? And then ask them for their feedback. Say, did you get anything back from the officials? So the phone call and the personal visit is important, but this is another important as well. And it doesn't matter where they live. We have friends all over the country. They can do the same thing. Just put in your zip code, and the members of town, or the members of the house come up, and then you're off. So there are a lot of people who will say, what's your solution? Now some people are sincere because they don't know any other solution other than this Article 5, because that's the one for them. And some of them are just angry. They don't really want to hear, like the gentleman that was debating me on your Facebook page, where he really didn't want to hear what I had to say. He just wanted to be angry and try to get me upset. Well, the Constitution is the solution, folks. It always was and will be. And don't you know that we have a video series on this to teach people that if you don't know what the Constitution is, then it can't be a solution. And so we need to get ourselves informed and then get others informed. And we've been hosting these video series, and that's something you guys, you folks, can be doing, right? Help create informed election. Now look at Congress, House of Representatives, 435 people, right? Each congressional district has what, about 650,000 people. Out of that, half of them are eligible to vote. Out of that, half are registered. So we're down to about 150,000, right? Out of that, half of those folks vote in elections. So now we're down to 75,000 people. Out of that figure, if it's not raining or there isn't a football game on or some distraction, those folks will go to the polls and make a difference. So we don't have to educate every single voter, the ones that matter. And our program does work. Now, it may not work in Newton. It may not work in Midtown Manhattan, but it works in a lot of districts. In Albany, we had some oath keepers, we had campaign delivery people, and John Birch Society members. We collaborated, created a report card for members of Congress, right? For one member in particular. They distributed this doorbell in areas like Clifton Park, where there's a lot of voters, and they did a mailing. They got a very good deal on mailings, right? The liberal incumbent, big spending liberal, had a 15 or 18%, he was ahead by 18% of the polls. And we did the distribution. He lost by about 10%, which is still a landslide, isn't that right? Isn't that correct? For those of you who live there? 10%? Sure. It's pretty much a landslide, right? Because we informed, and we didn't endorse the guy running against him. We just exposed his personal voting record. We took 8 votes. I think it was 8. And when the fellow won the election, well, the guy who ran the program, who engineered it, called him up and said, congratulations, but we're going to keep an eye on you too. None of this, you're our friend now, thank you for existing. No, we're keeping an eye on you, because you work for us, you see. And this guy's maintained a half-decent voting record, right? So it can be done, but assembly is required. Freedom, assembly is required. It's not just something they give to you when you take it, and you don't have to worry about it. You got to work at it, right? I recommend that you join the John Birch Society. I would suggest that you get more involved vote keepers, but we can find room for you in our group. We can have chapters here, a local chapter, what have you. Host a convention series like this. You do it 6 weeks. We've been doing a monthly one in Hingham, Massachusetts. Our members all over the country are doing this. I know they're doing it. I think some of you want to do an one, right? Not that difficult. You show a video and it's just that, right? Actually, after the next meeting with Dan, was thinking about putting that out. Great. That's outstanding, right? I already mentioned the voting records, right? And all of this Article 5 thing, we're also working to expose Agenda 21 Common Core, the North American Union, The next thing is this transatlantic partnership that Obama's pushing, fast tracking. This is something that may come up tomorrow, that will put the nail in the coffin if we don't stop it. And this should be at the top, not at the bottom, but pray. Some people, all you do is pray. But you have to put, which is fine, but again, when you pray, when you thank God for the meal, you still had to go out and make the money to buy it, so something's required, right?
Praise the Lord and pass the ammo.
That's right, bro. That's the best way to do it. And I want to, John Adams, did I post a letter? Yeah, here it is. John Adams, he's my second favorite president after Washington. Wasn't a perfect guy. He's the one that was the one that motivated the Declaration of Independence. He's the one that made that happen. Okay? He went to Holland and borrowed money from the Dutch so we could fight the British. Borrowing money from the Dutch, that's quite an accomplishment, right? He, a little tongue-in-cheek for my Dutch friends there, but they'll tell you, that can be a little frugal, they don't loan money easily, right? He's the one that recommended Washington be the head of the Continental Army, right? He's the one that gave us the Navy. He's the one that kept us out of a war, which would have made it an end of our republic. So he has a lot, he's the one that wrote most of the Massachusetts Constitution. And a lot of our Constitution was kind of lifted from that, you see. So, and he wrote, he had this quote that I use a lot, saying that our Constitution is for religious and moral people. It is fully inadequate for anyone else. I didn't know the source, so I did a little research. And my friend Dan, who wants to, which I believe we should restore the constitutional militia, it was a letter that he wrote to the Massachusetts militia. And it is right here. And this is just a little clip, not a whole letter. Avarice, ambition, revenge, or gallantry would break the strongest cords of our Constitution as a whale goes through a net. Our Constitution was made only for our moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. So that is really, we have to get our act together more than as well. That's the most important thing. And with that, I want to thank you. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them if I can. If I can't, I'll refer to my my constitutional malicious expert here, Dan. So I'll turn this off because these bulbs are a little bit expensive.
Oh, but you're a wealthy fridge book.
I know, really. Well, I have a laptop that wouldn't work, and I had to borrow Dan's, and I had to borrow my daughter's iPad as a backup. So, and of course, this is an expensive 5-star hotel that you have. No, I don't mean to pretend it's a great location. I'm glad to have it, but.
Yeah, it's a working elevator.
So, and it's an honor to be here, by the way. I'm very fortunate in that. I took my oath of office when I was 17 years in Boston. I didn't quite know everything there, but I knew it was something important. And it's something that I hold the day I die. Not just as long as I served. I was in the Red Army for 3 years and in the reserves for 6 more. I was a weekend warrior for 6 years. I was in a combat arms unit in Germany and 101st Airborne, and then I went to the reserves. And I said, that oath can last a lifetime. So you don't break the oath, you keep it. I know a lot more, but I know one thing. We were told never to obey a lawful order. We knew what lawful orders were. And I say, unfortunately, many of these people are, what happened to Watertown, that will be an unlawful order.
They don't know. They don't know.
So with that, I'll sit down and, turn. Well, I got a few questions.
The individuals that are pushing for the Article 5 Constitutional Convention, you had mentioned that a lot of the people, they just don't know the Constitution. Is it conceivable or perceivable that these people organizing this and pushing for this, their intent is to, well, what happened we did with the Articles of Confederation? They ended up throwing the whole thing out.
Right.
Is that their potential
Motivation
behind it?
Oh, I
Throw out
think
the
so.
Constitution?
Yes, I mentioned some of the groups. Some of the groups, I think, are well-intentioned. I mentioned, I'll list a lot of the people are. But, definitely. I think they want to, you don't have to have a runaway in the sense that they completely scrap everything and start. The amendments themselves can repeal other amendments. And that would be a runaway, you see. But, and I should have mentioned this too, and maybe when I update it a little bit. We live in an era of constitutional illiteracy. Right? Now, one of the things we do is we have information tables at various events. Right? Now, if I'm in a homeschool group, we'll be here in Worcester, in a couple of months, they do better they know a little bit more than, let's say, at a county fair. We do the Cheshire Fair, we've been doing it now for many years. And we'll ask people, they want to sign a petition, go to your member of Congress. So we ask the question, who's your congressman, right? Overland. And my son, who's with me a lot, he said 5% of the people we ask know who they are. Sometimes they will refer to a senator that might have passed away, 10 years ago. Sometimes they think their state rep is their U.S. congressman, but only 5%. Okay? And I think the people in Congress like it that way. Could you imagine, being an employee, and you can give yourself a pay raise anytime you want, and your bosses don't know who you are, and you're always working against their interest? What a job. I mean, you got a nice retirement after 10 years, right? See, so we're going to deal with a population that doesn't even know who the member of Congress is, and they'll say, yep, we need to have an Article 5. Something's wrong with that, folks. Something's wrong with that picture. And if you ask most people what kind of government we have, what do they tell you? Democracy. And if they read what our founders had to say, when James Madison, the father of the Constitution, I think it was in Federalist 10, that democracies have ever been spectacles of turbulence and contention, short in their lives and violent in their deaths. And these people want to restore democracy with an Article 5? You want to have a turbulent death? Maybe have a short life? Yeah, that's wonderful. So we have a lot of misinformed people. And like a lot of these people, when I'm making my postings, they'll come out of the woodwork and go after me. And I don't mind. I actually like it because at least I'm getting a reaction. And I know that a lot of people are reading this stuff, and I might be influencing them. So don't be discouraged when you get like that fellow that's going after us. Yeah. And that's fine. Yeah. Well, you're going to attack Dan. Who cares? You're going to have a little thick skin. So if you don't have thick skin, you're in the wrong profession, the wrong game here. And again, that means we must be resonating, because if they didn't go after us, it's like when we were doing this Agenda 21 campaign. First few months, first couple of years, you didn't hear much from the media. They never showed up, and all of a sudden they were showing up, ridiculing and denouncing us. Right? Excellent. That means they're paying attention. We welcome it. I had somebody from Southern Poverty Law Center down in Connecticut. And I said to John McManus, hey, I may not be on their top 50, but I'm getting I'm working hard. I'm trying to make that cut, from the AAA, to the majors, right? The show, when they go after you. They actually did two. They did one, and it was actually fair. I couldn't believe it. It was actually fair. It was done by a writer working. They probably don't write for them anymore. And then Esquire magazine came out. The guy that did it, we had a small Dave was with it, Dave Kopax, and I did the presentation. And this guy comes in, and he looked like he needed a makeover. I mean, I know people dress the way they want to dress, but he's working for Esquire, You think you'd have buff nails, cut for the hair, and all. He looked like he just got woke up from sleeping in his clothes. And they have the same modus of operation. They come in, they sit in the back, they don't smile, they don't like the eye contact. They might take one little pamphlet, They don't talk to anybody in the room. They don't give you the business card and say who I am, and they leave the minute finish. They're out the door. Their article's already written, before they came in. They just gave some facts. But this guy came in. He had some used books, and he said he made reference to musty books, right? And I said, so I wrote my rebuttal to him, and I said, I had two of my children there helping me out, and I want to thank Mr. So-and-so for his article. It was a classic example of yellow journalism, you see. So I don't want to spend the rest of my life going after every little crank on it online, but you make a couple of points, and then I tell people, when I go fishing, which isn't very often, I usually put worms on my hook, right? You always want to leave a phone number out there or a website. You want people to contact you, right? I was I mentioned I was on the radio. I called in, the Jeff Kuhn show, and I was plugging Second Amendment Sisters, which is that he was talking about his wife who's conservative but doesn't like to shoot. So what a great segue. And I said, their website. So I made sure I left the website, so people listen to that. He was interested as well. So do that kind of thing. When you make a posting, you want to put your Old People's group there, put JBS, put my name, whatever it is, but make sure people want to follow up. And a lot of people, there'll be 100 people out there, and there might be 2 or 3 people that will take it serious. Because unfortunately, most people aren't activists, like me. But there are out there. And that's all we can do. We got to find those people who are the activists. So. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi, my name is Shurtleff. I'm from a different point of view on this subject. I appreciate the Convention of States project, so there's some difference of opinion on this, but I respectfully appreciate the time you take.
And I appreciate that you came, and I don't think you're an evil person. You're probably a very decent guy, and I'm glad you're here, right?
And I share you spoke well of Phyllis Shockley, and you expressed some disagreement with some comments individuals have made, and we're on the same page on that as well. Some differences, the term con-con, I think it's more than semantic. For me, this seems like part of the Constitution itself is being called a con. I know the term can be just simply constitutional convention, but by using the shorthand con, it sounds like disparaging part of the text, and that may not be your intention, but it just sounds that way. And I think here, let me just explain why I think that suggestion is there. I think the suggestion is that the convention would be similar to the original constitutional convention, which came up with the text, as opposed to being a convention for proposing amendments. That's the language of the Constitution. And so by substituting language from Article 5 itself, substituting the other term, alien to the text, with the language that's in the text, and the language of the text says amendment is within the expectations of the founders. They are the ones who came up with the Bill of Rights. So to say that one must defend, not amend, as if defending excludes all possible amendments, that's alien to the thinking of the founders. So I think that there should be a way to amend that's consistent with the founders' vision, a lot of the history you gave, I'm not aware of. I don't know the details. You're much more experienced on this. I did have a concern that the way it was listed and some of the arguments for an Article 5 convention, they came from a variety of different groups, so it would be easily blurred together. Convention of States project would not go along with a number of things we're talking about. I've never heard any talk about corporations losing legal personhood. That's not. There's some other things that you listed that come from a variety of sources.
Right. And so nobody from a more conservative framework such as Mark Levin's would want anything to do with anything from George Soros. It may be that your concern is that a convention that if you got 34 states to propose to support something like the Convention of States project proposed application, that suddenly a convention once convened would then run off in a George Soros direction. That if you said, let's have 34 states supporting an amendment or a convention for the purpose of limiting the jurisdiction of the federal government, spending, the terms of federal officials, that even though you already have 34 states publicly stating their boards, that next thing you're going to see happen is people coming along with something radically different, sneaking it in the back door. But this politically, is that realistic? Okay, well, I appreciate it. Well, I know there's a lot of questions in there. The first one is that from the 80s, when people said con-con, it was really an abbreviation for an Article 5. It wasn't to reflect upon the first one that happened, and we understood it was under the guise of Article 5. That's what we talked about. In fact, at Harvard, they called it, the people, Meckler was there, he had no trouble with the word con-con in 2011. Now, and I didn't mention this either, 1995, they had this movement to have a conference of the states, right? It was chaired by the Utah governor at the time, Levin, and we played a role in killing it. This would have been an extra-constitutional conference of the states with the notion that the states are the sovereign bodies that created the federal government, and this convention is a sovereign body. And all they needed was 26 states. So that would have been a convention of the states, extra-constitutional, right? And I've been I've qualified, because I've heard that we're talking about an Article 5 convention. And as I said earlier, you could put the wording on that resolution. Each state can say only for a balanced budget amendment. But Congress, the Constitution doesn't say they will be making calls for specific reasons. So a Massachusetts call that will deals with personhood for a convention, that will be one call, and maybe Arizona calls for a balanced budget. That's another call. Okay, so if you pull those calls together, you get 34 states. You have a convention. You can't deny people from states that have a very liberal. They're going to be here too, right? Are they going to go along with Mark Levin's proposals? They have to come up. They're going to have this convention. I'm hoping we don't have it. If they have this convention, they're going to be there too. You can't keep them out, right? Can you keep them out?
No,
You can't keep them out. They would be there, right?
You can't keep them out of the United States.
No, I'm saying you can't keep them out of this convention. So California will send people with a progressive perspective, no matter what the call calls for, right? And you think they're going to walk away with a balanced budget amendment? And I told you before, the Constitution is pretty clear. You see, you can have a wonderful balanced budget amendment, but it's not going to solve the problem. I've read the proposed amendments. They allow for an unbalanced budget in case of national emergency. Last time I checked, aren't we in one right now? We have been for quite a long time, depending on what legal scholar. We need a constitutional budget, you see. So I wish that this would be the solution. I really do. I wish that it would be that simple. I wish that these folks like Shurtleff weren't backing this thing, and I wish to believe that these folks are honorable people that think if we have these amendments, we'll be able to get the ship right. I wish it were that simple, but it's not. And like I said, I've done the homework, and these folks from the 80s, they may not be around much longer, but the folks that their next generation will be there. And Harvard Law School, why would they? I mean, you got to ask yourself some questions there, you know. Why don't you collaborate with these people? You may not endorse their amendment, but you're going to be there at the convention with them. And will they compromise? I mentioned that earlier. Will they compromise? Possibly, right? So, anyway, and I know we got so much more than this is important. This is a life and death, in my opinion. But we should be working together to oppose Common Core, to create informed voters, so folks who are constitutionalists get elected and really rein in the federal and state governments too. So, anyway, but I do appreciate you coming.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
My name is Bob Huston, and I'm just wondering kind of how we get together as states, you know, and start holding people like Eric Holder and stuff accountable. I mean, when you look at a government that can basically do whatever they want, you're the highest lawman in the country basically saying, you know, I'm going to Congress, I can do whatever I want. I'm the type of person who wants to go down here and grab that son of a bitch by the ear and throw him in jail with a bunch of us with our weapons, guard him, and try him and have a jury, all right, picked by all 50 states, all right, and then we have a trial held by his peers, and we convict him without Congress as a freaking criminal. And you know something, it just seems to me, with the way the system's going right now, we have no checks and balances. We have a big influx of immigrants that are being told, let's tear the Constitution apart, and then we have our children being told in school that it's irrelevant. So the reality is our ability to vote to just like maintain our Constitution is slowly being eroded. So like we can have these meetings, we can have oath keepers like we all are, we can do everything we want, but slowly we're becoming such a small speck in this country that I think maybe when's the time to bear arms, grab these people by the skull, lock them up, and have on trials by juries picked by our own people.
Well, that time is not yet, and I hope it doesn't come to that. Because who has all the guns and all the tanks and the planes?
I think a lot more people than you think.
Probably, but I agree, but you have a Congress that can impeach this guy, and you have
Okay, well, this
listening to the people. I understand that, but let's look at the states. Let's states get together. States send delegates to Congress, don't they? They call them members of Congress, right? Can they instruct them? They're criminals, right? So that's the problem we have. So, I mean, if we just grab, that's called kidnapping, and have a mock trial, that's not a legitimate trial.
What is the point of the state militia if we have the right to make sure that our government is working for the people, which is basically really stopped in this country? We elect officials, they stop working for us, they're all criminals, they all have overseas bank accounts.
Well, Danny Mack, when he said state militia, I want to defer to my esteemed colleague who's, can I say expert on that subject? So Dan, maybe you can answer. How did we get the state militia back?
Well, some states have banned them, and which to me actually amazes me how you can ban a militia in a state.
You can't,
Massachusetts,
it's enumerated in several places in the federal and in all 50 state constitutions. They may ban private groups to try to exercise constitutional militia powers, but the governmental institution, in state, county, and local level, they can't ban.
Because to me, I think that one of the jobs of a militia would be hold the government accountable. And it's not a criminal act. You arrest somebody, which is, and you hold them, and it shouldn't be considered kidnapping, and you have a jury trial by the spears.
The explicit phrase in Article 1, Section 8 is execute the militia to execute the laws.
So basically, then what I'm saying would be illegal, and why couldn't we do that on a federal level, and go after something like Terry Fulton?
Well, who are the enforcers of the federal constitution?
People.
State,
Well, wait, I can just.
not the federal government.
Back here.
Not the federal government.
Put it into the
federal
building.
constitution, the states and people.
So basically, what I'm saying, if we had 50 states agree, and 50 state and militia get together, go grab Boulder by his hair and drag him into a cell, it wouldn't be kidnapping. It would be a legal act of executing the laws of the people.
Right, I'm gonna